Whether you agree with him or not, this confrontation shocked the entire congregation, and it's now sparking a national conversation that reaches far beyond one church, one pulpit, or one preacher. Something happened that morning, something raw, unfiltered, and unplanned, and it struck at the heart of a deeper struggle unfolding inside American Christianity. Not just a debate about clothing, but about identity, about leadership, about what masculinity in ministry is supposed to look like, not just spiritually, but visually, physically, symbolically. The day began like any other. The choir sang with passion, the congregation raised their hands, the organ played softly through the sanctuary. People came to worship, to find hope, to seek strength. Many had no idea that they were moments away from witnessing something that would not only echo through that building, but across social media timelines, across discussion circles, and across theological divides in this nation. Bishop Wooden walked slowly up to the podium, carrying not just a Bible, but a burden. His eyes surveyed the room, not harshly, not angrily, but intensely. He took a breath, and there was a sense in the air, like something was about to be spoken that could not be unsaid. The kind of moment when silence carries more meaning than words, when the congregation feels electricity in the space between breaths. Then he began to speak, clearly, firmly, unapologetically. He brought up the issue of male preachers, not laymen, not boys, not teenagers, but ordained leaders standing on the pulpit, wearing attire traditionally associated with women. He didn't tiptoe. He didn't soften the edges. He spoke as someone who felt a deep spiritual responsibility, not just to speak truth as he understood it, but to guard something sacred. As he spoke, reactions spread like ripples across water. Some listeners leaned in, as though hearing someone finally articulate what they themselves had quietly noticed but never vocalized. Others stiffened, sharply, uneasy with where the message was heading. Some nodded in strong approval, some looked down at their shoes, some felt tension slowly rising inside their chest. Because this wasn't just a question about fashion, it was a question about spiritual identity. Bishop Wooden has never been known as one who plays to the crowd. He doesn't bend for cultural winds. He doesn't tap dance across sensitive issues. For decades, he has preached what he believes is uncompromised biblical masculinity, that a man of God should carry a visual posture of spiritual headship, confidence, and clarity. To him, the pulpit is not a runway for fashion exploration, not a platform for attention-seeking, not a place for ambiguity. But others see this differently. To some Christians, especially younger ones, clothing has become a form of artistic self-expression. They see a preacher wearing robes traditionally coded feminine not as rebellion, but as creativity. Not as confusion, but as individuality. Not as erosion, but as evolution. And here is where the generational contrast becomes visible, not in words, not in doctrine, but in identity expression. Imagine someone raised in the 1960s church, stiff suits, solid ties, formal shoes, strict presentation. Then imagine someone raised in the 2000s, relaxed fashion, fluid aesthetics, expressive silhouettes. These two lenses see the same image and interpret two completely different realities. One sees a preacher in a feminine silhouette and thinks, "This is disrespectful to the pulpit." The other sees the same preacher and thinks, "This is authentic human expression." Neither side is lying about their perception. But both are shaped by different cultural histories. And that's the point. This is not a conflict over clothing. This is a collision between eras. As Bishop Wooden continued, he wasn't simply making a style critique, he was making a spiritual case. He spoke of authority. He spoke of distinction. He spoke of roles established by God. His central belief is that masculinity is not just a biological fact, but a spiritual responsibility. That the preacher on the pulpit is not just a messenger, but a symbol. Some would argue this is outdated thinking. Others would argue this is timeless truth. But here is where the story deepens, because this wasn't just about the pulpit. It was about what's happening in society at large. The erosion of gender boundaries, the reshaping of masculinity, the rise of aesthetic fluidity, these currents are real, and they are reshaping identity across America. The church is not immune to cultural forces. Whether we acknowledge it or not, the world influences the church. And the church influences the world. What we wear is not neutral. What we present is not silent. Clothing has always spoken, without voice, without sentence, but with signal. In ancient cultures, robes denoted status. In biblical times, garments reflected rank. In royal courts, attire expressed hierarchy. In military settings, uniforms communicated authority. In sacred environments, clothing symbolized reverence. So when Bishop Wooden looks at a male preacher in attire that appears feminine to him, he does not see fashion, he sees a sign. He sees a spiritual message encoded in fabric. He sees a symbol of something shifting in the spiritual posture of the pastor. He believes when masculinity is softened, leadership softens with it. He believes when image blurs, conviction blurs with it. He believes when presentation loses distinction, so does authority. But, again, others disagree. Strongly. Some argue that fluidity does not weaken message, it amplifies acceptance. That masculinity need not be stiff, it can be soft with compassion. That a pastor's role is not to project hardness, but love. They argue that a man of God can wear delicate fabrics and still preach powerful truths. And in that sanctuary, during that confrontation, these two philosophies were present, sitting side by side in pews, breathing the same air, hearing the same voice, and interpreting the moment through two completely different lenses. Then something interesting happened, a moment many might have missed. Bishop Wooden paused. Not for dramatic effect, but thoughtfully, almost mournfully. And there was something in his eyes, perhaps sadness, perhaps frustration, perhaps fear of where the church may be heading. Because for him, this is not merely disagreement, it is concern. Concern for identity. Concern for clarity. Concern for the next generation. He fears a church where boundaries dissolve. He fears a pulpit where identity shifts with trend. He fears leaders who present uncertainty instead of direction. And whether he is correct or not, the weight of his conviction is undeniable. He didn't speak with sarcasm. He didn't speak with laughter. He spoke with lament. And in the pews, some felt that lament deeply. Others felt judgment. Now let's look at the issue from another angle, because there is another layer that complicates this further. For centuries, church leaders have held a certain visual presence, a seriousness, a gravitas, a visual symbolism of leadership. Many Christians, particularly older ones, see the preacher as a father figure, a spiritual guide, a masculine anchor. To them, when that anchor appears softened or visually feminized, it feels like a pillar of strength has started to bend. This is less about theology than psychology, less about scripture than about symbolism, less about doctrine than about identity instinct. Humans look for cues, and we often interpret traits visually before we interpret them verbally. Now imagine a grandfather in that church, who grew up with stern, straight-backed preachers in dark suits. What does he feel when he sees a soft-spoken, slender youth pastor wearing a flowing satin garment? He might feel confusion. He might feel dissonance. He might feel distance. But imagine a teenager in that same church, raised in a world of influencer culture, celebrity pastors, creative aesthetics. He might feel inspired by it. He might feel that faith is being expressed creatively. He might connect emotionally to the softened style. Two realities, in the same room. And that is why this confrontation has exploded, not just on YouTube, but in hearts. It forces believers to examine something deeper. What is a man of God supposed to look like? Maybe the question is flawed. Maybe the question is essential. Maybe both. Bishop Wooden's critics say, "You're judging outward appearance." Bishop Wooden's supporters say, "You're protecting sacred presentation." Both believe they're defending truth. This is why the moment has gone viral, because it is not a shallow conflict. It is a deep philosophical and spiritual disagreement about identity, masculinity, representation, and the spiritual weight of embodied leadership. So now we return to the viewer. You, watching this. Listening. Processing. Don't react with reflex. Don't respond with hostility. Don't rush to accusation. Sit with this question. Does presentation on the pulpit matter? Is clothing meaningless or meaningful? Is it trivial or symbolic? Is it cultural or spiritual? Do we want pastors to reflect culture or to resist it, to adapt, or to stand apart? There is no easy answer, and perhaps there shouldn't be. Maybe the discussion is the point. Maybe the confrontation is a mirror. Maybe the tension is a teacher. So now I ask you, sincerely, respectfully, do you believe Bishop Wooden was right to confront this publicly? Or do you believe he overstepped? Say yes or no, and most importantly, share why. Because in this question lies the unfolding identity of the American Church.